AITA for cutting off my wife and one of our twins after a DNA test revealed he's not mine, only to regret it when it destroyed our whole family? He has your nose, my wife said, brushing a lock of hair from our newborn's forehead. I smiled, though my throat was too tight to respond. I remember that moment vividly, not because I believed her, but because I desperately wanted to. It was the first lie that tasted like love. And maybe I wanted to be lied to. Let me tell you something. If someone had taken a snapshot of our lives 5 years ago and posted it online, the comment section would have been filled with envy. We were that family. The one people used as inspiration boards on Pinterest. Perfect house. Perfect couple. Perfect twin boys. Except, perfection is a story we write for others. Inside, it's just layers of hope, fear, and the kind of exhaustion only parents know. But let me rewind. For 6 long years, my wife and I walked the tightrope of infertility. Month after month, test after test, the dream of becoming parents slipped further from our grasp. We tried everything, tracked cycles, acupuncture, fertility diets that made us both gag. Our bedroom transformed from a place of passion into a science lab. Intimacy became schedule. Hope became grief. It was tearing us apart, but neither of us would admit it. I remember one particular night, glass of wine in her hand, tears in her eyes, when she said, "Maybe we're just not meant to be parents." I said nothing, just reached across the table and took her hand, because I didn't trust my voice. I was terrified that if I spoke, I'd agree. We almost started IVF. We had the consultations, the financial plans, the injections sitting in the refrigerator like vials of promise. But before we could take that final step, it happened. A miracle. Not 1 heartbeat, but 2. Twins. Naturally conceived. After 6 years of trying, we had hit the biological jackpot. Our doctor said it was rare, extraordinarily rare. But he smiled, and so did we. Our tears this time were the joyful kind, soaked into hospital gowns and soft cotton blankets. From the moment we heard those heartbeats, I was all in. I read every parenting book I could get my hands on. I built the cribs myself, meticulously sanding each corner to make sure nothing would ever harm them. I practiced swaddling using rolled-up towels. I talked to my wife's belly every night like I was already a father. When the boys were born, identical in size but distinct in personality, I felt like I had been reborn too. One let out a fierce, determined cry, fist clenched like he was ready to fight the world. The other blinked up at me, wide-eyed, calm, like he already understood the world. I didn't think it was possible to fall in love twice in the same moment, but there I was, crying in the delivery room like an idiot, holding both of them. We named them Eli and Caleb. And those names? They were whispered into dreams, spoken with reverence, painted on nursery walls and stitched into baby blankets. People called us the Golden Family. Friends would visit and marvel at how lucky we were. "You guys are naturals," they'd say. I'd laugh and wave them off, but deep down, I believed it. We were naturals. We were meant for this. And man, I loved being a dad. I was the first one up at night for feedings, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd hold each of them close, memorizing every breath, every coo, every sleepy grin. I'd sing lullabies off-key and tell them stories they didn't understand yet, but I didn't care. I was their dad, their protector, their entire world. We had matching Halloween costumes, family beach trips with way too many bags. I took photos of everything, their first steps, their first foods, their first falls. I wanted to capture it all. I never wanted to forget a single second. People envied us, said we made parenting look easy. But the truth? It was just love. Raw, overwhelming, life-changing love. Every diaper change, every sleepless night, every tantrum, I embraced it all. There were no favorites. Eli was mischievous and sharp, always trying to climb something or tear something apart. Caleb was more reserved, thoughtful, always watching. They were different, but they were mine. Both of them. My sons. At least, that's what I believed. Looking back, there were signs. Little things I brushed off. Like how Eli hated the taste of peanut butter, but Caleb couldn't get enough of it. Or how Caleb had a slightly different shade of hair in the sunlight. But twins can be different. Fraternal twins often are. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. Because if I had let myself think otherwise, well, I wouldn't have made it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, we were happy. Or at least, I was. And for a time, that was enough. I used to say that I would do anything for my family. That I'd lay down my life for them. I said it so many times, it became second nature. But you never really know what you're willing to sacrifice until life asks for more than you ever imagined. And mine did. All it took was one emergency, one hospital visit, one test, to burn the whole dream to ash. There's something particularly cruel about how life chooses its moments. One minute you're wiping applesauce off the high chair, humming along to a silly cartoon theme song, and the next, you're clutching a hospital bed rail, watching your child's chest rise and fall beneath a tangle of wires and beeping monitors, bargaining with God like a madman. It started like any other Saturday. The boys were 5, full of energy, dragging their dinosaurs across the hardwood floors while I made pancakes. My wife, Sarah, was sitting on the couch sipping her coffee, half listening to the chaos while scrolling through her phone. Eli had this obsession with T-Rexes. He used to call them Roar Kings, and he kept trying to make Caleb's Stegosaurus bow to him. Caleb, never one to entertain dramatics, just rolled his eyes and went back to coloring in his book. But halfway through breakfast, Eli said his tummy hurt. That alone wasn't strange. Kids get aches all the time. I figured it was too much syrup or a mild bug. Sarah wasn't concerned either. We'll keep an eye on him, she said. But by lunchtime, Eli was pale, unresponsive, burning up. We rushed him to the ER, and from there, everything blurred. The doctors moved quickly, blood tests, scans, IVs. Words like severe anemia, possible internal bleeding, transfusion swirled around us like a storm cloud. I barely understood half of what they were saying, but I caught the most important part. He needs blood. We need to find a donor with a compatible blood type immediately, the nurse told us. Do either of you know your blood types? I'm O positive, I answered. That's a universal donor, right? Take mine. Do it now. Sarah looked just as panicked, clutching her purse like it could somehow protect her. I think I'm A negative, or maybe A positive, she said uncertainly. But he can take my blood, too, right? The nurse nodded, already ushering me toward the donation room. But she paused as if something didn't sit right. We'll check compatibility first. Just a routine cross-match to make sure. I sat in the sterile room, staring at the wall as they drew my blood, my leg bouncing uncontrollably. I kept asking when they'd start the transfusion, when Eli would be okay, why it was taking so long. After what felt like forever, the doctor returned. His expression wasn't relief. It was confusion. And behind it, something else. Pity? He began, flipping through the chart. We have a situation. Your son's blood type is AB negative. Yours, as you said, is O positive. That doesn't line up. I blinked at him. What do you mean it doesn't line up? He's my son. What does blood type have to do with it? I'm sorry, but biologically, it's not possible for someone with your blood type to father a child with his blood type, unless the mother had a very rare mutation, which your wife does not. It's likely a mismatch. A mismatch? He shifted uncomfortably. It means Eli may not be your biological son. The room began to spin. I sat there frozen, unable to speak. The fluorescent lights above me hummed like distant thunder, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat slamming in my ears. No, I finally whispered. You've got it wrong. Maybe it's a lab mistake. Run it again. Run it 10 more times. The doctor hesitated. We already did. Twice. For both of you. I barely remember the walk back to Sarah in the waiting room. I sat beside her, numb, the words tumbling from my mouth like ice cubes. They said, I'm not a match. She looked up at me, confused. What? But you're O positive. You said that. Doesn't that mean you can donate to anyone? I shook my head. Not Eli. They said, he's AB negative. She froze. Her lips parted slightly, her breath caught in her throat, but no words came. That silence, long and empty, told me more than any confession ever could. The doctor returned to say that Caleb was a match. They had already cross-checked his medical file, and it was safe to proceed. Sarah hurried to sign the release forms while I sat there, trying to piece my sanity back together. How? When? Why? I looked over at Caleb, who was sitting quietly with a nurse, his eyes wide and scared but calm. And then I looked at Eli, my little Roar King, pale, fragile, a shadow of the tornado he used to be. I had changed his diapers, rocked him to sleep, held him through night terrors. I loved him. And now, I was being told he wasn't mine? The logical part of my brain whispered, so what? He's still your son. You raised him. You love him. That's what matters. But another part, a darker, more primal part, screamed, she lied to you. She cheated. She broke your family. I didn't say anything to Sarah until the next day. After the transfusion, once Eli was stable and asleep, I asked her to step outside with me. We stood under the flickering hospital parking lot lights. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked one question. Is there something you need to tell me? She went pale, looked down. bit her lip. And then she nodded. Just once. It was one time, she whispered, tears already streaming. During that dark period, right before the miracle. I never thought. I swear I didn't know. I didn't respond. I just walked away. Not out of anger. But because if I'd stayed another second, I would have broken. They say there's a special kind of pain that comes from betrayal, not the sting of being lied to, but the slow, suffocating realization that everything you once trusted was built on sand. That's what it felt like the morning I got the DNA test results in my hand. I opened the envelope. There was no dramatic music, no thunderclap in the background. Just the sound of paper rustling and my breath catching as I read the lines that confirmed what I feared. Caleb, 99.9% probability of paternity. Eli, 0% probability. It didn't make sense, even as it did. Twins, born minutes apart, raised the same, loved equally, yet genetically, only one of them was mine. I had read about this phenomenon after that night in the hospital, heteropaternal superfecundation, a rare event where two eggs are fertilized by sperm from two different men during the same ovulation cycle. A freak occurrence, the articles called it. A statistical anomaly. 1 in a million. And that 1 in a million was sitting in my living room, coloring pictures of dinosaurs while watching cartoons. The other was still in the hospital recovering, his little body hooked up to machines, while I sat in my car wondering how the hell we had gotten here. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, showing up to the hospital, checking in on Eli, helping Caleb with breakfast, but none of it felt real. I was floating above it all, watching a version of myself go through the motions. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over again. How could she do this to me? Why didn't I see the signs? Was our entire marriage a lie? Eventually, I couldn't keep the storm inside anymore. One evening, after the boys were asleep, Eli had been discharged and was home by then. I sat Sarah down. I didn't shout or accuse. I didn't have the energy. I just asked her to tell me everything. She broke down, right there at the kitchen table, sobbing into her hands. It had happened during the lowest point of our fertility struggle. We'd been arguing constantly. The pressure, the hopelessness, it had pushed her to a breaking point. She said she went out one night, drank too much, ran into someone she knew from college. One thing led to another. It was a mistake. A one-time lapse in judgment. She said she hated herself for it. She swore she never thought she'd gotten pregnant from that night. When she found out she was carrying twins, she assumed, prayed, that they were both mine. And when they were born and looked similar enough, when the tests at the hospital didn't flag anything unusual, she buried the memory. Locked it in some dark place in her mind, convincing herself it didn't matter because it would never come to light. But now it had. I listened to her through clenched teeth, feeling like I was watching our life unravel thread by thread. I wanted to scream, to rage, to destroy something. But instead, I just stood up, walked into the boys' room, and stared at them as they slept. My sons. One mine by blood, both mine by love. And that's when the real torment began. I was torn in half. Part of me wanted to believe that biology didn't matter, that Eli was still my son, that I could forgive Sarah, that we could somehow stitch our lives back together. But the other part, the darker part, kept whispering that everything was a lie, that Eli was a living reminder of betrayal, that Sarah had stolen my choice, had let me raise another man's child without ever giving me the truth. I spent nights awake in the living room, nursing whiskey, staring at old family photos. I hated that I couldn't see the difference before. I hated that now I couldn't unsee it. Eventually, I made my decision. It wasn't some explosive moment. There were no ultimatums or yelling matches. Just a quiet, heavy conversation where I told Sarah that I couldn't do it anymore. That the trust was gone. That the lie had broken something I couldn't put back together. I told her I was filing for divorce. And then I did the unthinkable. I told her that Eli couldn't stay, that she had to take him with her. It felt like ripping out a piece of my soul, saying those words. Like setting fire to everything I'd ever loved. Sarah was hysterical, begging me to reconsider. She said Eli wouldn't understand, that it would destroy him. That he was still just a little boy who saw me as his father, and I was about to shatter his world. But I couldn't back down. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to stop waking up every morning and seeing a constant reminder of her betrayal sitting at my breakfast table. I kept Caleb. Not because I loved him more, but because he was mine. My blood. My son. And when Sarah left with Eli, it felt like a funeral. Not just for our marriage or for Eli, but for the version of myself I had been. The dad who used to laugh at dinosaur roars, who sang lullabies off-key, who believed his family was unbreakable. That man was gone. There are decisions in life that you make with logic. Others, you make with emotion. And then there are the ones that don't fall into either category. The ones that come from somewhere deeper. Primitive. Irrevocable. Like muscle memory forged in trauma. That's what it felt like when I signed the divorce papers and made it official. Sarah and I were over, and I was seeking full custody of Caleb. But the paperwork was just a formality. The real fracture happened the morning she left with Eli. She didn't take much, just a few bags, a car seat, and the child that had once called me daddy with stars in his eyes. Eli didn't understand what was happening. Not really. He just cried, begged to stay, asked if I would come with him. I told him he'd be okay. I told him I loved him. I told him he was brave. But I didn't go. I stood on the porch, my heart tearing in two, and watched my not son drive away with my ex-wife, while my real son, Caleb, clung to my leg, silent. It felt like I'd exiled part of myself. And maybe I had. In the weeks that followed, my house became a vacuum. Not of noise. Caleb still played, still laughed, still asked endless 5-year-old questions, but of warmth. The hum of family dinners, the sound of shared bath times, the late-night giggles from down the hall, all of it was gone. What remained was something clinical, polished, cold. Friends and family started weighing in. Some of them understood. Quietly, in hushed conversations and awkward pats on the back, they told me they would have done the same. That raising another man's child without knowing was betrayal. That I'd been tricked. Some even called me brave. But others were horrified. My sister told me she couldn't look at me the same way. She said Eli had been mine in every way that mattered. That what I'd done, sending him away, was abandonment, plain and simple. My mother, surprisingly, remained neutral, though I saw the judgment in her eyes every time she visited. She didn't say it, but I knew what she was thinking. You chose biology over love. But the worst part wasn't the outside noise. It was Caleb. At first, he didn't say much. He missed his mom and brother, of course. I told him they were living somewhere else now, and that we would see them soon. I didn't want to lie, but I also couldn't bear to tell him the whole truth. He was too young to understand paternity, betrayal, or any of the complicated adult decisions that had torn our family apart. But kids are smart. Smarter than we give them credit for. He started acting out. Not in the way you might expect, no tantrums or screaming fits, but in quieter, more painful ways. He withdrew. He became clingy at bedtime, refused to sleep alone. He stopped drawing pictures of dinosaurs, stopped asking about space and planets, things he used to be obsessed with. He started asking questions I couldn't answer. Where's Eli? Why can't he sleep here too? When's mommy coming back? Can we go see them? Every time he asked, it felt like a punch to the gut. I kneel beside him, try to explain in the gentlest way possible, tell him that families sometimes live in different houses, that mommy and daddy still love him very much. But my voice always cracked, and eventually he stopped asking. That scared me more than anything. Because silence in children is never empty. It's full of things they don't know how to say. I tried to compensate. I threw myself into fatherhood with a kind of desperation. We took weekend trips to the zoo, had movie nights with popcorn and tents in the living room, built Lego towers taller than he was. I tried to be the perfect dad, the rock, the constant. But it didn't matter. There was a shadow over everything. He'd laugh one moment and fall silent the next. He missed his brother, and there was nothing I could do to fix that. I considered therapy. I considered reaching out to Sarah. But every time I picked up the phone, I stopped myself. What would I even say? That I was second-guessing everything? That I was starting to wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life? No, that wasn't an option. Not yet. So I stayed the course. I tried to build a new life, just the two of us. I redecorated the spare room, packed away the photos of Eli, boxed up the drawings they'd done together. I told myself it was time to move forward. But the house felt haunted. And not by ghosts. By memories. It wasn't just the family that was broken. It was me. I'd made the choice. I picked Caleb, the child who shared my DNA, who carried my bloodline. I told myself it was right, logical, even necessary. And I'd wonder, for the 100th time, if I'd been his villain all along. Time has a way of dulling sharp edges, but it never truly makes them disappear. Years passed. Caleb grew older. And so did I. But neither of us grew the way we were supposed to. He was 7 when the first real cracks started to show. Not the small fractures from back when Sarah left, but deep, spreading ones. He started asking more questions. About Eli. About why his brother didn't come around anymore. He'd mention memories like they were dreams he wasn't sure were real. How they used to share a room. How Eli once gave him his last cookie even though he really wanted it. How they used to argue about whether Superman or Batman would win in a fight. I tried to deflect. I told him families were complicated. I said sometimes people needed space. I said life doesn't always work the way we want. But Caleb wasn't stupid. One day, after school, he came home quiet. He didn't say much during dinner, just pushed his food around his plate and barely touched it. Then, as I was clearing the table, he said it. He said he knew something wasn't right. That the other kids at school talked about their siblings and how they saw them every day. That he remembered loving Eli and didn't understand why love wasn't enough to keep them together. He asked if I sent Eli away, if it was my choice, if it was something Eli did wrong, or if it was him. I had no answer. None that would make sense to a child who had already started piecing the truth together on his own. And then came the final question, the one I'd feared since the moment I told Sarah to leave. He asked me if Eli was still his brother. It hit me like a car crash. The room spun. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream that yes, of course he was, that blood didn't matter, that love was supposed to be stronger than biology. But how could I say that? I'd spent the last 2 years proving the opposite, living the opposite. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Caleb just nodded. He got up from the table and went to his room. He didn't ask again for a long time after that. The silence between us grew. It was subtle at first, less laughter, shorter answers, less eye contact. He became more independent, but not in the healthy, growing up kind of way. It was guarded, reserved, like a door slowly closing. I thought it was just a phase. Until one day, I walked into his room and found his tablet open to a message thread. He had found Sarah and Eli. They'd been talking for weeks. He'd used an old photo from my Facebook to track them down. Sarah had replied cautiously at first, unsure of what he wanted, but Eli, he jumped at the chance. The messages were innocent at first. Updates, pictures, emojis. Then came the video calls. They had been meeting in secret, coordinating times when I was at work, sharing memories, rebuilding what I had torn down. I didn't get angry. I couldn't. Instead, I just sat on the edge of Caleb's bed, numb, while he explained everything to me in a quiet, measured tone. There was no guilt in his voice, just sadness and disappointment. He told me he missed his brother every day. He said he didn't hate me, but he didn't understand me either. He didn't understand why I made him feel like a reward instead of a child. Why I chose him over Eli as if love were a contest with one winner. He said he wished I had just stayed with both of them, or left both of them, because then at least it would have been fair. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. In the months that followed, Caleb pulled away completely. He stopped calling me dad. He spent every other weekend with Sarah now, by his own choice. At first, I fought it, took it to court, but even the judge looked at me like I was grasping at something already gone. Eventually, I stopped fighting. And now, years later, I sit alone in a house that once held echoes of laughter and chaos and love. The photos are still on the walls, family portraits that feel like they belong to someone else. I haven't taken them down. I don't have the heart to. They're like tombstones now, marking a life I buried with my own hands. I see Eli sometimes. Not in person. Not since the day he left. But in pictures, through Caleb's phone. He looks older, taller, but still has that same spark in his eyes. Sarah's in the background of some of them, smiling. They seem happy. And as much as it aches to admit it, I'm glad they are. Because someone had to be. As for Caleb, he visits when he feels like it. He's polite, civil, but distant. Like a guest in a house that used to be his. He hugs me goodbye, but it's the kind of hug that says, I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. And maybe he never will. Looking back, I realize I thought I was protecting him. That by choosing biology, I was choosing something solid, certain. But all I really did was trade one betrayal for another. I punished a child for something he didn't even know. I broke a bond that never should have been broken. And for what? So I could say one of them was mine? In the end, none of them were. Not really. Not anymore.